Hey, Pastor Tarun here. Welcome to Authentic Church. It's so good to have you with us. We really pray that this sermon blesses you and helps you to experience the authentic love of Jesus Christ in your life today. Hey, before we get into the message, can you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button so that we can keep you up to date with the latest sermons every week? All right, here's the message.
So in the previous couple of weeks, you would have heard Pastor Tarun share that in order to fulfill your life, you have to find that one, and that one is Jesus. And last week he shared that we all desire intimacy because that's how God made us. He talked about sex and relationships not being able to fill the void that God was made to fill, that was made to fill by God. Rather than elevating sex and relationships to a place of highest importance, we need to pursue God first. Let God be your number one while you seek your number two. And I want to just say right here that if you already got your number two, I'm going to pose a question. Are you seeking your number two? Or are you just walking through life with them? Because some weeks, I just walk through my life with my husband. I'm like, hey. But I'm not seeking my relationship with him passionately like I did at the beginning. So if you're sitting there going, I'm married, I'm in a relationship, this is for you too. Okay? So don't switch off, switch on. I come from a family of distance reachers. In fact, if my mum hadn't passed away last year, my mum and dad would have celebrated 50 years of marriage. I know, that's something to be excited about. My grandparents on my mum's side of the family celebrated 50 years of marriage. My grandparents on my dad's side celebrated 50 years of marriage. In fact, my dad's sister, before she passed away a number of years ago, celebrated 50 years of marriage. The fact is, in the whole of my extended family, in 4 generations, I'm one of 4 divorcees. In 4 generations. Now, we stopped counting 5 years ago at 101. I love the example that I had around me growing up and I have around me still. But who knows that that's a lot of pressure, right? Especially when I so eloquently tanked my first marriage. It wasn't on my own. The thing is this. I want to go the distance. I want to reach the end of my life with the same person by my side. I want the same person laughing at my dumb jokes. I've got the best jokes, he just doesn't know it yet. Maybe next one he is. I want the same person driving me crazy and me driving them crazy. I want my kids to look at their parents and say, some things are just worth all the hard work, all the effort, and all the faith. I want the next generation to look at us and say longevity isn't boring. It isn't a waste of time. It's worth fighting for, and it's definitely worth waiting for. Today I'm going to be rounding out this month's series by talking about finding number 2. We're going to take a look at God's principles to take our relationships the distance. So I want to start by telling you a story that's pretty common in today's world. It goes something like this. Once upon a time, a boy meets a girl. Thank you, darling. I won't share any stories about you today. He's like, why me, Mum? Because he won't react, right? So once upon a time, a boy meets a girl. The boy thinks the girl smells good. It's true. I'm not sure if the girl thinks the boy smells good, but anyway, the boy thinks the girl looks good. So the boy asks the girl out on a date. She giggles and says yes. He takes her to his favourite restaurant. She orders the most expensive thing on the menu, and he panics, like counting. But he pays for the meal anyway. The girl asks the boy back to her apartment. They go in. They sit on the sofa. He looks googly-eyed at her, and she looks googly-eyed at him, something like that. It's been a while. No. They kiss. They like each other. He stays the night and they have sex. They move in together and they try out marriage. Then one day, the boy meets another girl. So he dumps the one he's living with. It breaks her heart. She's brokenhearted and not really thinking clearly. So she rebounds with another boy, and then another one, and another one. And I'm just going to put it out there, that's not just, girls that do that. Boys rebound the same way. One day the boy meets a special girl, and she meets a special boy, and it's not each other, and they get married, and 10 years later, everyone's divorced. And they're wondering what went wrong. I know it's a gross oversimplification, but it's not so far from the world that we're living in today and that we're seeing play out. The question is, what went wrong? Well, for one thing, they were trying out being married instead of actually being married. They do all the things that you do when you're married. In a sense, they're kind of practicing marriage and playing house. So when things don't work out, in a very real sense, they go their own way and they're practicing divorce. And on the road to meeting that someone special, oftentimes people have spent quite a bit of time playing marriage with people and then practicing divorce with people. So is it any wonder when things get tough in marriage that we opt out instead of fighting it out? We go back to what we spent so long practicing, which is divorce. But who knows that God wants something better for us? Have you ever heard the saying that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got? Likewise, if you want something you've never had, you've got to do something you've never done. I say it again. If you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. If you want to go to a place that you've never been, you've got to travel a road that you've never travelled. If you want to do what everyone else in the world is doing, you're going to have to travel the world that everybody else is travelling. But if you want something different, you're going to have to take a different route. That's what's exciting about life. We get the choice to decide to do something different. Romans 12:2 says it this way: do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve God's will, what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. You've probably heard that version before, but this one's my favourite. It's from the NLT. Don't copy the behaviour and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know what God's will for you is, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. Isn't that good? Don't you love that version? It's just such a me version. Let him change the way you think, the way you speak, the way you do things. Then you will know a life that is good. His will for us is to have a good life, but that requires us to do something different from the status quo, different from what the world would tell us, different from the norm. I'm not sure about you, but I think that the norm today is a bit cray-cray. It's true. There is no norm. It's pretty much do what you want or what you feel, how you feel, when you feel, right? True? It's a bit of a generalisation, but it is not far from the truth. I feel, so therefore what I do is okay, right? I felt, you made me feel this way, so it doesn't matter if I hurt you back, right? So we're guided by our feelings, but our feelings are so fleeting, they change. What's normal when it comes to finances? To have high debt? What's normal when it comes to relationships? Divorce? Or even staying together for the sake of the kids? It's a good motivation maybe, but it's not the ideal and definitely not God's plan for us. So I pose a question to you today. Do you want normal? Or do you want God's normal, which the world views as abnormal, to become your normal? 1 Corinthians 3:18 says it ever so eloquently. Stop deceiving yourselves. If you think you are wise by this world's standards, you need to become a fool to be truly wise. Isn't that awesome? I feel good now. Don't you just love that? You have to become stupid to become smart. If the world says it's smart, then do it a different way. If the word tells you God's ways are foolish, the world will tell you that God's ways are foolish, outdated, controlling even. But God's ways have always exceeded the world's standards. But you have to be wise. You can't decide that you're going to become a follower of Jesus Christ and then everything's just going to be okay. You know, we all fall in that trap, right? And you have to actually make a decision to do things differently. It takes a conscious choice every day to do things different to the world's standards. Today I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to give you 3 thoughts on thinking differently from the way the world does. Are you ready? Okay, number 1. I will have a higher standard on who I see, who I date, who I court. Now, I know that one's a bit old-fashioned, but it's not old-fashioned, right? And who I spend time with. For you young people, court means intentionally dating someone with the intention of marriage, right? So you're just not playing around the fringes. Check this. You've met someone, you're interested, and you've made a decision that you're going to date with the intention of getting married. We're not trying it out. Isn't that awesome? We've tried that out with our kids. I love you. Emma's here, everybody, with her baby. Woohoo! As a Christ follower, we should have a higher standard on who we will see. It's not saying that we're better than everybody else. We're just having a higher standard and making sure that the person's on the same journey as us. 2 Corinthians 6:14 puts it this way. Don't team up with those who are unbelievers. How can righteousness be a partner with wickedness? How can light live with darkness? Pretty direct, isn't it? But simply put, or maybe not so simply, it means that you have different beliefs and different points of view. You are choosing to live lives very differently, and more importantly, you have very different worldviews. A Christ follower will have one perspective on money, discipline, raising children, on even how time is spent. Sunday morning fellowship versus Sunday morning football. For each of them, it's a no-brainer, right? But at some point, it's going to cause conflict. I'm giving my first 10% to the work of the kingdom. I'm not giving my money to that church. That pastor just wants to buy a new car. Let's go to church. I'd rather go to breakfast. I'm dropping the kids off at youth. My kids aren't going to hang out with those crazy extremists. We're having a church barbecue, a family barbecue after church. You spend all your time with those people. And these are responses I've actually heard, right? You can see how things can so quickly spiral when you have different beliefs and different foundations. And when things really start to get hard, as they seasonally do in marriage, do you follow the world's standards or do you follow God's? It's a fair question, right? I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm just saying you have to work so much harder. You might say, oh, but she's so hot. He's such a spunk. It'll totally be worth the effort. Listen. When your kids get sick and you're on the way to the hospital, it won't matter how hot she is or how much of a spunk he is. If they can't petition God in prayer by faith, it's not going to make a lick of difference how good looking they are. You want someone who's going to pursue God with you, someone who's seeking God with all their heart, someone that's going to stand in faith with you. Outside of God, relationships don't work the way they're supposed to. I hear you say, but Pastor Melanie, how do I know that someone is passionate about Christ when I meet them? Have you ever noticed that when you meet someone, the conversation usually goes to what they are most interested in. Hi, my name's Melanie. What's your name? What do you do for a living? How do you spend your time? They want to impress you, right? So they start talking about all the things that they love or they're good at. So the question is, what are they passionate about? When Tarun and I first started dating, it was pretty clear to him what I was passionate about. I had a million questions about faith in God, about Catholicism versus Pentecostalism. We spent literally hours with me asking him all kinds of questions about the Bible and faith and his walk. Now, he'll tell you that he wasn't really interested in his faith. He was just interested in the cute girl, right? I love you, darling. But let me tell you this. For a guy not walking with God at that moment, and a guy that will openly tell you that he wasn't interested in it either, he not once in all the hours that we spent talking about God and faith and why Christians hurt each other and why God loves us enough to make the ultimate sacrifice, while he was busy answering all those questions that you don't really want to answer when you're running from God, not once. Not once at any point did he try to steer the conversation away from God. Did he try to talk about all the reasons to run from church or faith or his people? He didn't once try to convince me that it was all a waste of my time. He didn't once try to convince me that we had better things that we could be talking about. Not once. So you tell me, what was he passionate about? He just sat and talked with me about God and faith for hours and hours and hours. So how did I know that he was passionate about God and faith, even though we hadn't known each other very long? I just listened to what he had to say. The way he stood taller when he talked about God's love and shared with me everything he knew. That's how I knew. I didn't need to ask him. It was all in the conversation. A higher standard of who we see and who we spend time with. God wants you with someone who is passionate about the things of the kingdom. And number 2, a higher standard on what I will do, or for some, it might be a higher standard on what I won't do. Think about that for a minute. A higher standard on what I will do, or for some, it's a higher standard on what I won't do. Ladies, you keep chasing after that bad boy because he's mysterious and cool. Don't be surprised when that amazing guy just walks on by because he thinks that you're not the kind of girl that he wants to take home to his mum. Right? True? Let's get real. And guys, you keep playing that treat me and keep and keen game. Don't be surprised when you can't keep that amazing girl that you met because she's got a higher standard than the way you're treating her. Let's be real, right? 1 Peter 1:14 and 15. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. That's where so many people live, not because they're bad people, just because they don't know any better. It's like we do things because it's the way we were raised. We've never really thought about it. It's just what we do, right? My dad followed Essendon Football Club my whole life, so I just followed Essendon Football Club. Not because I actually follow football. Who do you support? Because I'm Victorian, right? So who do you support? Oh, Essendon. Where are I on the... I've got no clue. He's not part of my family. Nah, just joking, right? But true, right? We just absent-mindedly think these things, do these things. Here's the good news. If we're willing, God will change the way we think. Verse 15 goes on to tell us, but just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. And that includes in our relationships. But what does holy mean? It seems about out of our reach for us mere mortals. It comes from the Greek word hagios. It means pure. Be pure. Be morally blameless. Be set apart. Be different in all that you do. I like that. Be different in all that you do. That seems a little more achievable, doesn't it? Right? It means if you want something you've never had, You have to be willing to do something you've never done. Yes? That seems achievable. You've got to take a different road to get to a different destination. You've got to decide ahead of time, ahead of meeting that cute girl or that bad boy, that there are certain things that I will or I won't do. You have to decide what your standard is and stick to it, and don't compromise. So where will you set your standards? Let me pose some questions to you. Just shout out your answers. You're married and a cute girl comes up to you at work and says, "Ooh, I love your shirt." And she smiles. "Looks so good on you." You smile back. You reciprocate with a compliment. The small talk turns to flirting, and the flirting leads to something more, and before you know it, you've crossed the line. Okay or not okay? Don't be shy. Right. Okay, well, let's say that you don't cross the line and have sex, but you mess around a little and you're still intimate just without the sex. Okay or not okay? Oh, you guys should be more passionate about this. No. Okay then. So there's nothing physical that requires removal of any clothing, but you just kiss a little. Okay or not okay? Okay then. You know that anything physical, clothed or unclothed, is completely inappropriate, so you don't go there. But you open up to him. You share with him your heart and your heartbreak. She listens to you, really listens to you the way that your wife seems to have forgotten how to do. You haven't crossed any lines physically. There's just a really strong connection and attachment. Okay or not okay? Yeah, not okay. So here's the question. Why are all those scenarios not okay? Because they're intended for two people in marriage. Told you I was going to get in your face. So that being said, and we all agree that would it not be okay in marriage, then why, okay, listen up. I need you to listen. Then why would it be any more appropriate for someone who is single or outside marriage? Have you ever stopped to ponder that thought? The Bible tells us not to pursue the customs and standards of the world. He didn't say, if you're in marriage, do not conform. He simply said, do not conform. Have a higher standard for who you spend time with and a higher standard of what you will and won't do. Let me talk to us that are married here today. And if you're not married, take notes, listen, because, one day you might meet the one, and let's be real for a moment. The statistics on marriage aren't great, even for us Christians. They've changed. Maybe you've gotten busy, the kids have needed your time, you've stopped spending time together intentionally, and you've both made some mistakes. The bottom line is this. At some point in time, there was something special about that other person, something that first caught your eye. There was some reason, some level of chemistry, intimacy, passion, something consistent that brought you two together. So what happened between you're the only one for me, and I'm not in love with this person anymore? The answer is life. Sin happened. We got distracted. We get selfish. We start to only notice the negative things that our partners do. All those cute quirks that are just now irritations? And without you even noticing it, that person that was the only one for you once, well, you're not so sure about them anymore, and definitely things aren't the way they used to be. So what needs to happen? What's the answer? Well, one could argue that in this situation, if you want something you once had, anybody? Then maybe you need to do something you once did. Right? In the first number of years of Tarun and I being married, every time he would travel, he would write me these love notes. Right? They were really cute. And then he'd cut them up into puzzle pieces. I know, right? I still love him. Anyway, he'd cut them up into puzzle pieces and he'd hide them around the house so that I'd find them randomly, change baby's nappy, wash the dishes, do washing. I'd find these things and it made me feel so loved by him and made me feel like I was so important that he missed me and thought about me while he was away. I loved it. I loved it so much. But then we had a couple of kids and life got stressful and it got busy and things changed. I started to feel less loved or unloved and things started to unravel. Now here's the thing. Sweet as those notes were, we just needed to have a more realistic view on the way of communicating our love and our time and our intimacy. So right from the very time Kai was born, we used to date. My mum would take Kai for an hour in between feeds and we would duck out and have dinner, and we were intentional with our time, right? We were intentional. So when our marriage started spiraling out of control, in order for it to survive and revive, sure, there were definitely things that needed to change, but what we really needed to do was go back to the beginning, to a time when time was intentional, when love was intentional, our words were intentional. In fact, Jesus says in Revelations, repent and do things you once did. So the question is that for you? I think it's for us all the time. I think it's for us, it's not just now, it's for us all the time. We have to be intentional. We got so busy with life that we slipped beneath the standards that God set out for our marriage. If we want what we once had, we have to be willing to do what we once did. When we pulled out all the stops for that other person, we gave our time, our attention, our intimacy, and our words of affirmation. We gave our partners the highest standard than what we perhaps do now. And number 3, a higher standard of what we will expect. Ephesians 3:20. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. When we're busy telling God everything we're looking for or want in our spouse, his simple response is this: don't you know how much I know and how much I want to give you, including a spouse? To all you single ladies, stop settling for the guy that treats you like dirt, makes you feel less than. You can't change him. You won't change him. You need to have a higher standard of what you will expect. To those of you who are Christ followers and still waiting, keep waiting. If she tells you we're just going to play around the fringes and not go all the way, and that's okay because no one will know, have a higher standard of what you'll expect. And don't settle for someone that asks you to compromise on your standards and God's standard. For those of us that are married and are thinking, man, God could never save our marriage. That was me. 10 years ago, not even, it was more than that now, 12 years ago, I'm like, God, you're looking in the wrong house, mate. You're talking about the neighbours. You're not talking about me because there's nothing that's saving my marriage. Nothing at all. I was in Melbourne. Tarun was here. I had the kids. We had an agreement in place of how the kids, this is how far it had gone, right? Packed the kids up. In 24 hours, I was gone. And we'd agreed that the kids could call Tarun any time. Didn't matter what time of the day or night it was. That is where our marriage got to. And I was like, God, there's no way you're fixing this. None whatsoever. How big of an insult to say that God could never, and he's not big enough to fix my marriage. Do you know, even when he told me, I got this. I'm like, no, you're wrong house. Talking about the neighbour, right? Even when he told me, I doubted, right? So this is it. Show me 2 people, I don't care what they've done, how they've hurt each other, who are completely submitted to the power of God, and I'll show you a marriage that can and will heal. Now, I'll say this. We both had to be completely submitted under God. So if you're dating someone or you're walking life with someone that doesn't know God, then how are you both going to be submitted? It's just a question, right? He is a God who makes all things new. Don't settle for what you're settling for. Never settle for less than God's best. Don't conform to the customs or the standards of the world, but let God change the way you think and transform you. With everything in us, we should be seeking the one. If he blesses us with the two, we will unite and serve him better together than we could apart. But we never compromise on God's standards. Kai, do you want to come up, darling? Right now, all across this room and at home, let's all be honest. I'm going to ask you a question, and it's between you and God. Have you slipped beneath the standard of God in your marriage? If you're married, don't point your finger at your spouse. I'm not talking about your spouse. This is between you and God. Have you slipped? Do you need to go back? For those of you who aren't married, have you, just like the rest of the world, settled for a standard that is less than God's best? Maybe it's a mindset. Maybe it's who you hang out with. Maybe it's the places you go. Maybe it's what you're doing. You're with somebody that you know is not God's best for you. The question is, how can God bring the right person when you're busy wasting your time and their time with the wrong person? Now's the time to do things differently. Now's the time to ask yourself the question, have I lowered my standards and settled? Have I compromised the standards of God for my life? The good news is this, that we can start today to do things differently. We simply start by saying, God, forgive me, transform me, change me, and make me new. And then we listen to what he tells us to do.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We really pray that that message blessed you. If you enjoyed it, why don't you share it with a friend that you think will enjoy it also? And hit a like and give us a comment, because we'd love to hear back from you. If you'd like to give to the work of Authentic Church or get more involved, head over to our website, authenticchurch.com.au. We look forward to seeing you next time.